Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Hey, I thank you for joining us for a little deeper dive into the debt, how we structured, what our thinking was over the past 5 years. And just so that you are aware, I was under great leadership with Ty Anderson, Gary Smith at that time, very, very hard workers for this club, very smart in the changes that were made. I also served on the executive committee and finance chair during this time when we developed the 10-year plan. And that's what we're following. And that's why I want you to understand also why we have to continue to invest in the club and what has happened and transpired during various periods of time to put us in a position that we really needed to address it. Some of these decisions are hard because nobody wants to pay more dues. Nobody wants to invest capital into, meaning money, into anything. We all would love to have the club stay pristine without actually having to dig up $100 or $200 a month to apply to the capital needs. But we have got to do that. We all know in our own homes, things break. We need new roofs. We need new electrical. We need the showers redone. All of those things are not talking about giant aspirational goals. They just simply need to be done. We need to replace irrigation systems. We need to replace pumps. And they have to be out there and planned for. And unfortunately, in the past, we never had a capital account to draw from. So we started that at the insistence of some very, very, if you will, big background in all country clubs, big data driven. And if you remember, about 4 years ago, they came to the club and talked about the red bucket clubs, the yellow bucket clubs, and the green bucket clubs. We may not like it, but we were at that time a red bucket club. Not good, you're right, it isn't good. That was a terrible place to be. We had too much debt, plain and simple. We were not going to be doing well going forward. We couldn't meet our needs. That's been addressed in various backgrounds. And if you want to see that presentation again, you're more than welcome to call the office and they'll be happy to forward it to you. It's pretty important to understand why we have to take care of our assets. It doesn't work to say we just have to cut costs. You can't cut costs to prosperity. It never works. And so that's been addressed, and we still do carry some debt going forward. Fortunately, it's manageable. And with our cash flow and with our positioning, we have moved from a red bucket club kind of sort of into the green. And if you want full transparency, I will tell you this as a board. Several years ago, I know Ty Anderson was talking about constantly getting emails and phone calls from people that wanted to help us by coming in and buying the club and taking it private. I know nobody in our club that is thinking that's a very good idea. We aren't going to do that. We don't consider it, but we had to move from red bucket on. And guess what's happened? The phone calls have stopped. The emails have stopped. We just have moved out of that position where we look like we're in danger. This is very positive going forward. So what we have done, I want to go ahead and go back because I continue to hear this, and I'm not joking. I've talked about it myself 3 times at annual meetings now about the debt repayment. How the board took the $50 that was supposed to be applied to debt and then just put it in operations. Number one, it's not true. I'll just stop right there before I get wound up. I have talked about this constantly. It is something that we did at the time because we were forced to by covenants. Every dime until 2021 was applied to that. The reason we stopped is we were not allowed to prepay, period. We were done. The bank covenant said no more prepayment. We paid off. There were 2 debts. One was paid. That one could prepay. We were trapped in a swap. A swap is a fancy term for a fixed interest contract a fixed interest agreement on top of a variable loan, which is what we had. What it did is that it forced us, if interest rates dropped and we wanted to refinance, that we would have to pay a penalty on the swap. That swap penalty reached nearly $400,000 at the peak. $400,000. Did we want to refinance a couple of years ago? Sure. In perfect hindsight, should we have paid $250,000 and then hoped that interest rates went up so we didn't have to come to you and tell you why we did that? Yes, it would have been cheaper than paying out a higher amount. But nobody forecast rates going this high. Even if you said you did, you didn't. And the reality is that that's where we were at the time, is we had this huge penalty. It has now gone away. We are actively seeking refinancing now. And I will tell you this, it's highly unlikely, I never want to say never, it's highly unlikely that we are going to be using a swap on this. It's also highly likely that we are going to create an inborn discipline to pay this off within the next 10 years, meaning an amortized 10-year note. We can afford it. We plan on doing it. We'll see where interest rates are. We'll see what happens between now and the financing time. And I also want to say this, for whatever reason, we're hearing we're blowing up debt covenants and nobody will loan us money. That's absurd. Do you want to loan a club that has the acreage we do and the location we do and the facilities we do $4 million? I do, and so does everybody else out there. There's no question about it. So I do want to address this and to understand it really is semantics. What we could have done with any one of these capital projects that were necessary. We certainly couldn't, for example, sit around and wait for catastrophic failure on our irrigation system. We had to move forward with that soon. And I am really glad we did, because can you imagine the cost of that today in the inflationary environment we're in now? And if we had a catastrophic failure, we all know what happens to grass. It would have been a catastrophe, and you can't get it fixed tomorrow. It just would have burned up for who knows how long. So we needed to fix it, and we didn't fix it with debt. So let me mention what we did make a decision a couple of years ago to do. Instead of going on the line of credit for these capital improvements, investments in the club, we made a decision to not borrow $1 million on our line of credit and then keep the debt repayment, which no longer could be used to pay off debt, in a zero interest bearing account. That was the decision we made. Instead of paying 5% interest on $1 million of debt, we took the cash and had no debt. That's $50,000 a year saved. In fact, in 2021, it was even, I think we renamed it debt avoidance, because that's what it was. We used it for debt avoidance instead of trapping it in a zero interest account and paying interest on debt. That's what we did. And we did it with careful thought. I hope it's a little more understandable, but moving forward, that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. I also want to focus very quickly on the why of the original $4 million of debt that we're not able to pay that off at this time. And as we look back, if we were able to raise our dues by 5% a year, we would have virtually paid off that $4 million with only 5% dues increases since 2008. I referenced it in the earlier, but I wanted you to also see this dues sheet in front of you now that shows you how little we raised dues at various times in the past and how we've really just started this capital account. We can't operate by the seat of our pants anymore and just wait for things to break and try to figure it out. That's why we fix our eyes on the 10-year plan and the capital plan, so we see what's going on behind the walls, what's coming up, and try our best to make plans. We couldn't foresee what happened in 2023 or 2022, excuse me. It happened. It happened. Operations are back on track. I believe inflation is so slowly simmering down, and I think we're going to get ahead of that curve next year. I'm very confident we will. Either way, we're looking at everything every single day, and I know the management team is, and the board is on it as well. So thank you for your time. Please give us any of your questions. I appreciate it. We're going to continue to communicate whatever questions you have. Thank you.